This is For the Record with Ort Connor.
Coming to you live from Radio Caymanians Studio.
For the record.
For the record. For the record.
And it is my pleasure to have in the studio with me again this morning Mr. Mario Ebanks, who is a candidate in the upcoming April 14th general elections. He's seeking to represent the electoral district of West Bay West in our Parliament. Mr. Ebanks, good morning, sir. Welcome back to For the Record.
Good morning, Mr. O.C. Thank you for having me, and thanks to Radio Cayman for doing this. And I want to also say good morning to all of our listeners in West Bay West, West Bay, Grand Cayman, Cayman Islands, and around the world. It's good to be back. When we last spoke, it was on the 8th of March.
Yes.
And at that time, we talked about some of my background and some of my history and where I've come from. And we started talking a bit about policy. And so I appreciate the opportunity to continue with this program, which, as you mentioned, is a paid program. But I just arrived here this morning because I was at a 1 hour debate on Rooster Crosstalk with Mr. Barry Quappe and Mr. Kevin Morales. It was supposed to be with myself and Mr. McKeever Bush, but he didn't show up. Mm-hmm. No show, Mr. McKeever, no show. But it's disrespectful, for the hosts, hostess, Ms. Barry, and Mr. Kevin, and all of the listeners, for him just to decide not to show up. And what he appears to prefer to do is go around at his public meetings and throw out mud and untruths, but he's afraid to face me, to debate the issues, and to be cross-examined. And so that is a cowardice act. And like I say, he didn't show up. I'm here this morning to talk about solutions and policies. But I also heard this morning on Radio Cayman a very weak paid political statement by Mr. McKeever. And in that statement, he was talking about somehow trying to say that I am for income tax, simply because one of the persons who nominated me, Mr. Troy Leacock, in his personal social media page, he talks about income tax and talking about tax fairness. He's talking about tax fairness. And Mr. McKeever now, in his wisdom, his political genius, always having alternative facts and another agenda, is trying to put that income tax handle on my shoulders. And I had to remind him today, and I did previously, that he's running against Mario Ebanks in West Bay West, not Troy Leacock or anybody else. And so I have no agenda around income tax. The thing that I said then and I say now is that I believe that it is time to stop the wanton, reckless giving away of tax revenue and giving all these concessions to these large developers, especially those building on 7 Mile Beach. Those folks are going to make millions and millions of dollars of profit on those projects. Cayman doesn't need to incentivize them at this time because the economy is booming. As a matter of fact, the development is just over the top. So, but Mr. McKeever and his surrogates and the current government, rather than them trying to get revenue to help us through this pandemic, they're giving away money to these large developers. So he's trying to accuse me of wanting income tax, which is wrong, which is false. But he is not saying about what he and his surrogates are doing in terms of giving these large developers tax breaks and concessions, while at the same time Caymanian families and Caymanian children are feeling the pressure. People are living in their cars, people are living in their boats on dry land, but they're giving away money to these large developers. But I also want to say, Mr. O.C., in terms of tax, you remember this because you're a keen observer and you've been around for a long time. I believe it was around about 2010, 12 range. Mr. McKeever, when he was leader of government business, he proposed a thing that was called community enhancement fee, but that was an income tax. He said we had to do it to balance the budget, so he went around town hall meetings and whatnot in the country pushing this thing about this community enhancement fee. And I have all the information on it. I was not in government then, and but he went out to I think there was a big meeting that was called by the Chamber of Commerce or the business community at the Lion Centre. The Lion Centre was packed to capacity with people, and they almost ate him alive up there, him and the government, for proposing this income tax, which he called a community enhancement fee. Nice words, sounds good, but it was an income tax. So in the West Bay West race between myself and Mr. McKeever, he's the only one who has proposed income tax. But he's trying to say now it's me. It's him. The record's clear. It's there. The public record is there. So I am in favor of providing proper taxes in terms of environmental impact fees and infrastructure impact fees on large developments. And that money will go into a separate fund to deal with environment protection, social services, education, infrastructure, that those developments cause that impact. But I am not in favor of income tax. Cayman, as I said to you when I came the last time, we are a consumption-based tax economy where we pay import duties on a lot of things, and that's where the revenue comes from. We have fees on financial services, entities, registration fees, etc. We have other income, indirect taxes. But we're not a tax-free country. We pay tax now. So many of those taxes that we call fees and are consumption-based, many of those were brought in place while Mr. McKeever was in-house for the last 36 years. So if he wants to call those taxes as well, he was there when those were brought in. He hasn't reduced many of those in the time that he's been there. But he can't put the blame or put the handle of income tax on me. He's the income tax man and not me.
Okay. Now, I know, and we know your one of your fortes, has to do with human development, and you want to talk about human capital as well as talent management in the Cayman Islands as well.
Thank you. And so, see, I know you were a previous Chief Immigration Officer, and under you came the administrative responsibility for the immigration boards, the Business Staffing Plan Board, and the Work Permit Board. And so a lot of this stuff you would have faced as well in your career. But I am a human resource professional. I have a bachelor's degree in international finance and marketing with a minor in economics and public affairs. And I also have a master in business administration and a number of other certificates and credentials in human capital, human resource development, and management. And one of the things I've enjoyed in my career so far, in my life so far, is the issue of human resources, human capital development, and training and learning in the workplace and in the community. And my plan for, if I'm elected in West Bay West on the 14th of April, is that in our manifesto, which is now being finalized, is a big body of work around the issue of human resources, human capital development, and training, and elevating the Caymanian pool of talent. So one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to review all of the employment-related legislation. So we're going to review the labour law as it currently stands. We look at the immigration law as it currently stands in relation to training, and we're going to put in place a new labour relations law or Labour Relations Act. When I was as Director of Labour and Pension previously, we actually did propose a labour relations bill. Myself and the Minister, Ms. Tara, went around the country with other people to talk about that. And it was not perfect, but it was a lot better than we have now. The existing labour law is confusing. It doesn't have enough teeth, and it needs to be brought up to standard in terms of human rights, but also in terms of best practices. So we're going to be doing that as part of our talent management, is to make sure we have a proper labour relations law or a new labour law that provides workplace protection, also provides for equity. The other part of our plan is we're going to review the existing work department. The work department, as you know, stands for Workforce Opportunities Residency Cayman. And that department is really, pardon me for saying this, but I think that department is, for the large part, just a renaming, because I don't think they've done a whole lot of improvements since they were called immigration. Because they don't have the resources, they don't have the IT or information technology platforms that they need. Their online portals tend to be problematic for employees and employers. The reports that they generate to the boards are lacking. And so we are going to look at that whole department, what it needs to be fit for purpose. But we're also going to join work with the labour section of the existing Department of Labour and Pensions.
Okay.
And we're going to bring it all together by proposing a new Human Capital Development Authority, a new authority whose primary role will be to look at training, Caymanization, workplace relations, health and safety in the workplace, everything that the labor does now except pensions.
Okay.
And also the stuff that work does that they do under the powers of the immigration law amendment, and bring it all together under one umbrella and have it more accountable, have it more fit for purpose and fit for the 21st century, because what we have now is really a 1972 model, which was when the protection law was first brought in. There's been tweaked over the years, but it still is nowhere near where it should be. I was hoping that this government, with the Premier, Mr. McLaughlin, who started his work career as a labour inspector, I was hoping that he would have some sympathy for the workplace and for the workers. And but I listened to some of their meeting the other night, their launch meeting that they had, the Progressive and their alliance partners. I did not hear anybody talk about labour reform, any kind of training and human capital development. Nada, nothing. And I was disappointed with that. So we're going to change that. And we're going to bring in place the long overdue Human Capital Development Authority. That follows a suggestion that was made in the National Strategic Plan, Vision 2008. And we're going to dust that off, we're going to improve it, and we're going to do that. So the second plank in our talent management is a new labor relations law or act and a Human Capital Development Authority.
And what sort of outcomes are you looking for when all of this has been reimagined?
Yes. We're going to look for Caymanians being able to move up in their careers to meet their full potential. You know, years ago, there was more Caymanians as managers of banks in this island than there are now. So you had, I don't want to call names or banks, but you know who they are. They were the upstanding Caymanians who are now retired.
Yep.
And they were managers of banks, and they were globally equipped, these Caymanians. Now they're retired, and their jobs are filled by non-Caymanians. So one of the measures that we're going to look at is people being able to move up. We also want to make sure that if you have an employer who is treating his employees, especially Caymanian employees, like they're animals, why should that employer also get a rubber stamp in all their work permits? What's happening now because of the disconnect between labor and between work? Somebody can be a horrible employer, but on the other hand, they can get their permits because there's no connectivity. When I was director of labor, there was complaints that we had of certain people. There were people who were actually before the labor tribunal. And I tried to tell, and the inspectors tried to also have a dotted line to the immigration to let them know, but they were not looking at that. They couldn't, right? If we join these two things up, there'll be transparency. And if you are going to play games in your workplace, you're going to pay the price when you come to work permits.
And you would have the legislative framework to back that up, because you were saying that, while there was no connectivity between labor and work, and probably no legislative arrangements in place that they could use the information that they receive from labor to bring sanctions against those employers as well.
Yes. So the Human Capital Development Authority would also have to be a creature of legislation. So you'd have to have a Human Capital Development Act or whatever you call it that would also bring the powers to that. But you would have to have all those rules clearly enshrined in the regulations and transparent and enforced, and make sure that everybody is aware of them. When I was with the Director of Labour and Pensions, we tried to put in place something called a culture of compliance. So we worked with Immigration, Trade and Business Licensing Department, Health Insurance Commission, and of course, pensions National Pension Office was also within that department.
Yes.
So those four entities had something called a culture of compliance, right? So we were sharing information between each other, but we had to be careful because we had to have the legislative right to share information, and now with the data protection, we got to be even more careful.
Yes.
But we can make that connection between those entities, make it in legislation, so there's no question. Because some of those folks, for example, And I know that there's some that are very keen to do it. There's some that are kind of worried about, well, I can't squeeze this person with his business license renewal simply because he is a terrible person as an employer, because the legislation didn't allow it. But we've got to pull it all together into a human capital development law or act or whatever you call it to bring all these entities into one circuit.
Okay. Ms. Susan, we have to take, we can continue? Okay, great, good.
So the third aspect of our talent management strategy, unless you had another question for me. But
No, not right now.
Okay.
Not right now.
Is that the third aspect is that we're going to provide funding for tertiary education or education beyond high school. You know, one of the things that I find a crying shame, and I'm so aggrieved by it, is that we're sending Caymanians overseas to university and colleges, right? But there's no monitoring of them as to how they're doing. There's no plan for them when they return, where they're going to work. When they come back on vacations, there's no holistic, proper structure in terms of they're going to get work experience in this department because they're going to be moving that when they come back. There's no shepherding of those people. When I got back from university myself in 1986, in 1987 we formed an association called the Overseas Students Association, and it was for that same purpose, where those college students who were overseas and realized that we had a problem because, we were just getting the Caymanians going overseas then in numbers and coming back. We realized that there's a serious problem here. So we formed that association for that purpose. That association did well for a number of years. I was the second president, and I served for 2 or 3 years, then I went on to the board as well. But we're going to put that kind of structure in place within our strategy for talent management. The existing scholarship secretariat supposed to be doing that, but how can that secretariat, with probably 2 people, if that, be able to process all these scholarship applications, get them to the Education Council, monitor them, do the payments, do the renewals, physically not possible. But if you pull all this together under an authority, we can have labor, immigration, work permits, training, and scholarships under one umbrella. We can make this thing connect. Right now it's just disjointed. Disjointed totally. So that's the third pillar of our plan in terms of talent management. The other is we're going to commission a national skills needs and skills availability assessment. We need to understand in our islands the kinds of skills that we need for the workplace or for our economy, the new industries, the new kinds of leading indicators in terms of roles that are coming out. We're going to commission a skills needs assessment. What do we need in our public and private sectors, in our economy for the next 20 years, right? Once we have those needs, then we'll do a skills assessment, right? Skills, what people have as skills. Yes. Then we have a gap. We have a gap between what the economy needs and what the economy possesses in terms of available skills. That gap then needs to be filled with training funded by scholarships in the public sector and private sector as well. Private sector has to be fully involved in this. On-the-job training, online training, evening classes, whatever it takes to close that gap, we're going to do. But until we get that gap established of what the economy needs for the next 20 years and what we have, then we don't have nothing to work on. But we're going to commission that. And it's easy. Other countries do it. I know how to do it. And people in government know how to do that kind of assessment to give us the information that we need to be the catalyst for a proper human capital development strategy, which will be augmented by the authority that I mentioned to you and also by the law or by the act.
And so this whole thing will be focused mainly on Caymanians, employment of Caymanians.
Definitely. The whole, when you say human capital, I'm talking about Caymanian human capital. So thank you for help me clarify that. We obviously need to have foreign labor here, but when I come back the next time and talk to you about what we're going to do in terms of that as well, because I also have a plan on that. But this talent management, human capital development is strictly for Caymanians. So to recap thus far, then we'll do a new human relations, labor relations law or act. We'll do a new human capital development authority, which will be bolstered by Human Capital Development Law or Act. We're going to have our university students properly shepherded and monitored and moved into roles so that they can succeed other people and they can start their career properly. You know, the amount of people that tell me that they graduated, their children or themselves graduated from UCCI or UCCI primarily, and or they go overseas to colleges or technical schools, whatever, and they come back and they can't find a job. Yeah, that's just shameful, really, and scary, and it's so disappointing to see those young people sitting at home, and I can't, they can't get jobs, and who sent them on a scholarship seem to have forgotten about them, and we must do better than that. And the fourth pillar is this skills needs and skills availability assessment that we're going to do. One of the other points that I have in terms of human capital that our campaign is developing is looking at the cost and benefits of integrating public schools. What I mean by that is that right now, because of capacity issues, you know that from your immigration days, you have a requirement where people who come on a work permit have to send their children to private schools.
And the unintended consequences of that.
Exactly. The unintended consequences of that is that we have a separation of expats and Caymanians. We don't have the cross-pollination of cultures and skills and ideas, right? So we're operating in silos. Caymanian silo, non-Caymanian silo. 20 years go by, everybody's in society, you don't know these people, you can't live together, you have these sort of grievances that come out. Because in my day and your day in school as well, everybody knew each other.
Yes.
We went to school with whoever, right? And when we grew up, we lived just as we lived in school. Now it's a little different. I believe you got to look at the costs and benefits of integrating schools so that the non-Caymanians can also attend public schools. Whether they have to pay something to do that or not, that's to be determined. But somebody asked me at the other show was that this morning, but how are you going to do that if you have issues with capacity? Now, we have in West Bay a property that is on Stadium Drive and goes all the way to Fountain Road, and it's all the back of a John Cumber school area. That piece of property is huge. It's been filled a couple of times. It's still sitting there vacant. It was supposed to be for a hurricane shelter and a multipurpose civic center, and also another school. That's not yet done, right? So we need to have another school in West Bay. But our existing classrooms as well at the primary school could be used if you integrate the schools. You could have two different shifts. For example, you could have the older children, maybe grades primary grades 3 to 6, for example, go to school early in the morning. Say they go from 8 till 1 or 2. And then the ones that are a little bit younger and might have a problem getting up so early, they go from say 2:30 till 7 o'clock in the night. So you're using the school facilities, and you're also working with the parents with their schedules, and you're integrating schools, but also using your capacity, because many of these schools, Mr. O.C., when school is finished in the afternoon, the schools are like dormitories. They're just dead,
Yes,
and you can use that. So integrating schools is another area. The final point, the second to the last point in terms of our agenda for training and human capital development is to provide technical and vocational training programs. Now, University College has the facilities, and they tried to do that years ago, to have technical and vocational training. Mr. McKeever Bush, you may remember, bought the John Silver's property on Church Street in West Bay. It's called Islands Club, I think. It was a nice little small hotel, had a little restaurant, and had a little a bar and stuff like that. He bought that with the view that it was going to be a hotel training school. Have you been down there yet recently, Mr. O.C.?
No, I haven't been there. I know after Hurricane Ivan, we actually took it and we converted it into apartments where we had people who needed housing to live there. That was the last.
But is it being used for hotel training school?
No.
Right. No. So that's my point. So all these promises about what they're going to do, and they spend government money and buy these white elephants and don't use them, but yet they say we should have technical and vocational training when they go out and their public meetings and they run around the district talking foolishness to people. So our plan is to create technical and vocational training programs using the existing facilities of UCCI and other places that do technical training now and individuals, and also looking at that John Silver's property for a hotel training center, which also would be dovetailed with the existing hotels, condos as well. And my last point on the human capital development area is looking at revamping the Department of Labor and Pensions to make it more effective in terms of labor compliance and employee relations. As I mentioned, a new labor relations bill. But my plan also is to remove pensions, the pension administration aspect from that department, and combine the National Pensions Office for the private sector with the Public Service Pension Board with the public sector, and have those two together, because there's so many synergies. The skills that you need for pensions in the private sector and public sector are very much similar. So you'll have everything under one roof. You have two pieces of legislation, probably two boards, but the administration of that function of pension, which is very, very important, which I'll talk to you about in the future, will be properly managed using combined resources that exist now, and also sharing technology, sharing synergy, sharing people, sharing intelligence, and having the best possible outcome for retirement planning for Caymanians when we need it the most, i.e. when we stop working. So those are 6 areas that we're going to be focusing on in our agenda for action in terms of human capital development and talent management of Caymanians. And I just want to say to all of the voters in West Bay West, if you like what I'm saying, tell your friends, share it, talk about it, reach out to your family, your children, grandchildren. Let's get Mario Ebanks elected in West Bay West, and together we'll work with other like-minded people within the society, and we're going to make wonders happen. It's not just a promise. We can do it if we have the right people in there. No more promises, no more short-term gain for long-term pain. Let's focus on the future. And I promise you that I will be a good role model. I will not embarrass you locally or internationally. I will be there for you, and I will have an office, and I'll be there for you, whether I am the Premier or Deputy Premier or Minister or Parliamentary Secretary or MP. I'll still make time for you. And my wife is also a community worker, and she has also said to me, I'll give you 8 years, no more than that, and I'll help you. But after that, then I'm back with her full time.
Now, what you spoke about this morning in terms of human capital and talent management, you have found that there's a huge appetite out there in the public for this. And how do you do that without alienating the important sectors like the business community?
Very good point. I thank you for raising that. Remember that I was also a manager, first Caymanian manager of the Chamber of Commerce. I am also a trustee right now of the Chamber Pension Plan.
Okay.
I was a councillor in the Chamber of Commerce until the end of 2019. I have good relations with the private sector, with the business community. They know that when Mario Ebanks proposes something, I am open for suggestions. We can work together and make it work. And my objective and my clarion call has always been, I want to be fair to the business community and employers, but I'm going to be a fighter for the employee. I believe in balancing the two. And that's the stance that I took when I was manager of Chamber of Commerce. That's the stance that I took when I was Director of Labour and Pensions, looking at both sides and making sure we work together. So it's not a case of us versus them. It's let's work together to make it better for all of us, for all of us, for all of us. It's time, West Bay West. It's time for real leadership, committed leadership, ethical leadership. And I submit to you, Mr. O.C. and our listeners, it's time for Mario Ebanks to be elected in West Bay West on the 14th of April. I beg you for your vote. I promise you that I will deliver. And I thank you for your consideration. And may God bless and guide you as you make this most important decision.
And we wish you all the success in your endeavors as well, folks. That was Mr. Mario Ebanks, candidate in the upcoming April 14th general elections. He's a candidate in the electoral district of West Bay West, seeking to represent that electoral district in our parliament. Again, Mr. Mario, thank you, and we look forward to continuing interviews with you, where you will again, lead us in terms of what your agenda is. And at some point in time, once your manifesto has been published, you will be sharing that with the public as well.
I will be, and I hope to unveil that on your show as well. And I want to say to the people before I leave also today that you'll hear some stuff at a public meeting tonight by my opponent. I say to you, check the facts on those. Do not believe all the nonsense that he puts out there. Call me or see me and ask me if you have any doubts. But he didn't show up this morning to debate me on the crosstalk. And so he's afraid to face me and face the facts. But you all be smart, vote smart, and together we can win.
Okay. Folks, I want to thank you all very much. Have a great day. And as usual, we ask the good Lord to bless these three beautiful, wonderful Cayman Islands.